Me and my two friends stepped inside a haunted house, and the one thing I knew about this house was apparently there were some strict rules you needed to follow once inside. I had no idea what the rules were, but the house was just an ordinary house built in the 1900s. My two friends were Samuel and Connor, and we were all fans of haunted houses. The three of us smashed the front door and we were able to enter the abandoned haunted house. To be honest, the whole area was kind of abandoned. As soon as we stepped inside the house, we still didn't know what the rules were. Inside the abandoned house, it is exactly as you would expect an abandoned house to be. Distant from present times, even the atmosphere didn't want us inside. And then Connor shouted out to us because he had figured out what the rules were. You would think the rules were written on the walls or on some piece of paper, but when Connor showed us his arms, it had writing on it. When me and Samuel checked ourselves out, we too had writing on our body, which we didn't write, and it was the rules of the house. Connor on both his arms had the rule no talking written on his arms, and he couldn't talk anymore. Samuel on his feet had the rules no violence written on one of his feet, and I had something written on my neck which read no leaving for the three of you. And I guess we each had our own rule to follow. Connor couldn't speak anymore. Samuel couldn't do anything violent anymore, and when he tried to smash a window, he just couldn't. I tried leaving, but there was a new door which had replaced the old one we had broken to get into the house. Also, my rule written on my neck also affected the other two, while theirs didn't affect mine. Connor started to panic because he couldn't talk anymore, or whenever Connor tried shouting, but nothing would come out. Then Samuel had an idea. Because the rules were somehow written on our body, the only way to break them is by breaking the limb it's written on. Then I did something without asking Connor's permission and broke both his arms, and Connor managed to scream. He was angry and glad at the same time that I broke his arm and disproved Samuel's theory to be correct. Connor then broke Samuel's feet, the one where the rule was written on, and Samuel was able to act violent again. They were both in pain, but relieved, but none of us could get out of this house. You see, my rule, which was written on my neck, affected all three of us, and I know that there is only one way to break the rule. Samuel and Connor can break windows all they want and act violent, but a replacement would just appear, as none of us could leave the house. The only way to break the rule is by snapping my neck. I declined all offers of snapping my neck, and there is no easy way to break someone's neck, as the fatality of death is too high. After many days inside this house, I am considering letting Samuel break my neck. Luckily, we brought ibuprofen to ease the pain which Samuel and Connor are experiencing, and some food as well. We are running out of food and pain medication, and the only way out is by snapping my neck to break the rule of not being able to leave this house. I have tried breaking my neck, but the rule seems to be a strong one. Jason was just home from work, and turned on the baby monitor, smiling, looking at his wife and baby upstairs. He could still see how beautiful his wife looked and still fell as in love with her today as much, if not more, as the day they met. It was love at first sight for him, so he tells her anyway. But whether it was love at first sight, it definitely is love now. He was about to walk upstairs to his wife and the baby when there was a knock on the door. He answered it and couldn't believe his eyes when his wife was standing at the door right in front of him. He felt a shiver run up his spine, wondering if his wife is standing at the door, then who is upstairs with his baby? Mary Jason's wife asked him what was wrong. He said, "I don't know what's happening or how, but I was just watching you on the baby monitor, and then you knocked on the door." Then suddenly Mary put on a face like she was just after seeing a ghost. I turned around and saw at the top of the stairs a woman that looked exactly like Mary. I felt a shiver run up my spine again. Suddenly, my wife ran up the stairs, shouting, "Get away from my baby, you maniac! Get away!" There was a fight between my wife and the woman, and suddenly my wife pushed the woman downstairs. She was dead on the impact of her head against the wall. My wife explained, "Jason, you know I love you, and you know that you mean everything to me, but that woman is my twin sister. I am so sorry to have to tell you this way, and I am so sorry I lied to you about my parents dying in a car crash. I feared you'd be turned off me if I said the truth. That's my twin sister. I know I told you. I never had any sisters, but I just didn't want any complications. My parents could never tell us apart. It made me sick we looked so alike. But we were so different. Even my parents could never tell us apart, except for a knife wound on her back that she got in a fight in high school. When she was a teenager, she got put into an asylum at 17 for murdering my parents, but last week she escaped. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you this sooner, I really should have." We decided to go to the police, and thankfully my wife didn't get arrested after the police knew her twin sister's history. That night we were in bed, and I felt a strange feeling. I don't know why. Then, out of the light of the moon, I felt a shiver go up my spine as I saw on my wife's back a scar that I never saw before. Because there was no scar before. I then realized my wife was not lying next to me, but her twin sister was, who killed her parents and who killed my beloved wife. I froze in fear, wondering what to do next. Then I saw a knife rise, and I heard words mumble in a sleepy tone. "Are you awake?" Back in 1883, there were 5 prospectors, including a man called Alfred, travelled towards Gunnison in Colorado in the high hope of being lucky enough to find gold. The travellers found themselves with very low supplies, and to make matters worse, they were exposed to relentless, freezing winter months. They tried their best to battle the freezing cold, but it turned out that their only option was cannibalism. This led to murder. Alfred was the sole survivor and was convicted on 4 counts of murder on Friday the 13th, April 1883. Packer's defense was that his fellow travelers had turned hostile towards him and he was forced to kill them, and the only reason he ate their bodies was out of necessity. Whether it was true cannibalism or out of bare necessity, Alfred was convicted on Friday the 13th. Nora was 12 years old and always was afraid of a monster hiding under her bed. She stopped looking only a few days ago because she was always afraid of looking into a monster's eyes. She used to tell people but stopped as she knew they would tell her that she shouldn't worry about such ridiculous things. Suddenly one night Nora was trying to get to sleep, but she was tossing and turning. She heard noises from under her bed and she decided to take a look. When she did, she saw her father that she had drugged a few days ago gone a very pale colour. It was now time to kill the monster she knew. Her father's eyes opened in horror as she got out a knife and slit his throat. Then she was relieved that the monster under her bed was dead. Weeks later, the body was found, and Nora was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the case took an unexpected twist. Years earlier, there were a whole family murdered by a little girl, and she was found crying, clutching onto a doll. Some people say the doll was possessed. One detective was surprised to learn the story because he remembered the doll in the room. When he went back to the room, he looked at the doll, but what happened next made him freeze in fear, as the doll wasn't the same doll he had seen. The doll was a miniature version of Nora. He thought it was some sick prank until her eyes blinked. Simon always, as long back as he can remember, always wanted to go to the St. Patrick's Day parade, but his drunk father never allowed him. His father used to stay at home all day drinking and getting drunk. Years later, when Simon was 8 and had the independence to go himself, he made the most of it and wanted to really make an impact on St. Patrick's Day and enjoyed it to the full. He designed shamrock hats at the tender age of 8, and for some reason they became a must-buy hat, and the shops couldn't have enough for the people that wanted to buy them. They were that popular. It was finally St. Patrick's Day, and he was really looking forward to finally enjoy St. Patrick's Day parade. He walked into the parade and enjoyed all the floats and was so happy seeing people wear his beloved shamrock hat. He knew that now was the time. After all, he was so lucky to be able to come across a witch one day on his travels through a fairy fort. He still didn't believe it until it happened. Then he said the words, "St. Patrick's Day, top of the morning to ya." They could be any words he chose, the witch said. It was all what was done during the ritual made it work. He looked around, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. But finally he could see some man next to him turn green, then his child. He smiled, knowing this was all happening. Within minutes there were more and more people turn green and turn into leprechauns, and within 20 minutes the whole parade was a bloodbath with leprechauns killing each other by any means necessary. Simon smiled, knowing that finally he got payback for all those years his school friends and families were enjoying St. Patrick's Day.
My parents weren't happy with where we were living. We wanted a new start, so we moved to a new town called Maple Heights. It was a nice town. Most people were friendly. I moved here when I was 10. I met this same kid who lived on the same street as me. He seemed to be the same age as me, but I never saw him go to his house. We became best friends. We always hanged out and played at my house. One day, I asked him if we can go to his house today. He told me that's not a good idea because his grandma was sick. I asked about his parents and he started crying, so I never asked him about them again. It always crossed my mind of what happened to them and where they are to this day. But I didn't want to see him cry again, so I left it alone. It's now 8 years later, and we have just graduated high school. I've never been the one to drink or throw parties, but my parents were out of town this week, and my friend kept begging me. So I told him I'll throw a small get-together. I said it would just be me, him, and some of our close friends. He smiled and agreed. It came to that time when the party would come. I was only expecting a couple of people, but instead, a bunch of people came. I was getting pretty nervous because my parents were coming home the next day and everyone was drinking. Stuff was getting knocked down and the house was a mess. I got mad at my friend for inviting all of these people. And my friend told me that he wanted me to make more friends before he had to go. I was the kid who always did my schoolwork and never had any fun. So tonight, I told him I would let loose if he helped me clean up before my parents got home. He agreed. I felt pressured to drink, so I tried it and then I started partying and drinking some more. Before I noticed, I was waking up and everyone was gone. I quickly looked at the time and realized that my parents were about to be home within 10 minutes. I started to panic because I still had the whole house to clean up. But when I checked the house, it was completely clean. I was so confused. I then found a letter from my friend telling me that he cleaned everything up and apologized that he had to go and that he would never see me again. I was very confused, so I tried calling him, but then I realized that he never had a phone. I then went to go visit the house my friend told me where he lived, but I was never allowed to go. I went over to the house, and it was a creepy looking house. I rang the doorbell, and no one answered. I saw that the door was open, so I went inside. The house was abandoned as if nobody has ever lived there. I heard some weird noises, so I ran out of the house. I came back home and decided to look up my friend on the internet and on all social medias. I came across an article of my friend and of his grandma. The article said missing 10-year-old boy who was never found. The article was from 8 years ago and was just recently updated. It said that the boy was never found. I said to myself, this is really weird. Then I looked at the date and it said 1847. I couldn't believe what I have just read. I asked my parents about that house and they said that a family of a 10-year-old boy, his grandma, and parents all were killed in the house. I asked my parents how. They said the boy killed his whole family then went missing for 8 years.